Tenemos interpretación al español por si alguien gusta escuchar la presentación en español. Gracias.
Thank you. Headsets for the hearing impaired are available. Please indicate if you should need a headset. There's no report from the closed session. So, Mr. Superintendent, do you have a report?
Since our last board meeting, I had the opportunity to travel to Kansas City, and when we landed, it was 7 degrees. It was freezing. But it was there with the principal of Adams and 2 of the teachers to receive the ESCA award. It was really a great moment for them to be on stage with schools from across the country receiving that similar award. Really proud of Adams and the staff and the work that they've been doing for a long time. So a very fitting tribute to their success. And then on Saturday, I was invited to speak at, it's called the EAOP. It's basically where UCSB brings high school students on campus to get a glimpse of UCSB, to hear speakers. I still call her our own Monique Limon was the keynote speaker, and she was awesome. She just spoke from her heart about her life experience. But what a great role model to have your assembly person speaking about what education does for kids. And then we got to do small group breakouts. So I had 3 groups of about 20 kids, and they just want us to speak about the role of education, leadership opportunities, and career. So I don't get to speak to high school kids very often anymore. So it took me back to my roots as a teacher. So those are my comments.
All right, next we'll have our student board report. Ms. Carey?
Yes. Good evening, Board. I'm just going to very briefly introduce the delegation from Santa Barbara High School. So without further ado, if you want to come up, this is, as you know, the second installment of student board reports. And I provided some background last time, and just a reminder that these came out of our student voice study sessions in the fall. And we're looking forward to hearing from the students from Santa Barbara High School. Thank you in advance for your diligence in your discourse and in your preparation for presenting at tonight's meeting. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, and thank you for taking the time and giving us the opportunity to speak about the issues that we've been trying to address as a student body. We are from Santa Barbara High School. We are representing the Student Voices group as well as the Student UN Council, and we are going to be discussing the issues we've tried to resolve as a union. Here's our student report. My name is Morgan Lamel. I'm the president of Santa Barbara High School PTSA, as well as a core leadership member of the Computer Science Academy.
My name is Andrea Gonzalez. I am ASB Senior Class President. I am on the Graduation Committee and the Site Council Committee.
My name is Lulu Dunaway. I am the founder of the Student United Nations, as well as an ASB member.
Hi, my name is Jake Trimble. I am the stage manager for the Santa Barbara High School Theater Department, as well as a CSA core leadership member.
Awesome. We are going to begin with the statement of need and the background of our initiative. Our statement of need is an improvement on the access of educational resources across all academies and throughout Santa Barbara High School in general. Prior to the Student Voices board meeting, conversations had been held between many student groups, including ASB, the Forge, as well as communication between students and administrative staff with regards to student equity and creating a dialogue for all student leaders to communicate with one another. During the Student Voices board meeting, our committee hit these topics on the head and establish action steps towards attaining these goals, which my fellow presenters will discuss in the following slides. Around the time that the board meeting transpired, Ms. Dunaway was working with Dr. Simmons to create a way for all student leaders to interact with each other and to discuss the concerns which piqued each student group's curiosity in an effort to form a catalyst for positive change on our campus. Thereafter, both Dr. Simmons and Ms. Carson held a meeting between our two entities where we discussed our common ideas and made a conscious effort to form the newly founded Santa Barbara High School Student UN Council.
Our statement of desired outcome is cross-pollination of student groups on campus, mixed student body, equity and access to classes, social interactions, experiences, and resources. The demographics of each academy should reflect the overall demographics of the student body.
We also determined that a desired outcome would be to provide more opportunities for students who are not in academies or in differing academies to have access to dual enrollment or weighted elective classes, as certain academies have greater opportunity for achieving a weighted GPA with elective courses than others.
Some of our action steps that we have already taken to achieve these desired outcomes is that we have met with the administration to discuss the concerns of the Student Voices meeting. We have also met with Ms. Carson to learn about the master schedule process as well as form the Student UN. With the administration, we decided to combine the work of the Student Voices group with the Student United Nations so that we could work together towards the same goals for our campus. The Student UN Council is a group of all student leaders on campus. The members include, but are not limited to, club presidents, student academy representatives, and representatives from various programs on campus. As a group, our goal is to create an environment on campus where people can address the issues they see as well as integrate the 17 Sustainable Development Goals presented by the United Nations and integrate it into our campus culture. We had our first meeting in December and voted on goal number 10, reduced inequality, as our first initiative. Some plans we have on incorporating this goal into the lives of the students on campus is by having Congressman Carbajal come and talk to the Student UN Council about his experiences with the highlighted goal, as well as interview him for The Forge, our high school newspaper. The VADA program will also do an art installation to address this topic. As you can see, we're trying to address the integration of these topics in the program through a multi-layer design.
The formation of the Student UN Council was certainly a huge step towards satisfying our desired goal. However, this shift in school culture will not be readily fixed. It's certainly not going to be completed by the end of this academic year, nor will it be completed by the end of next academic year. Rather, there's going to be a continuous effort towards positive discussion and including as many student voices as possible. We hope that as the frequency of UN meetings increases, we will create more student interactions and discussions to further fuel the change in dialogue about issues that may not yet be on the surface. A rather sizable ongoing change is the adjustment to the master schedule of our high school to increase the number of classes offered to all students. And with the addition of events co-run and supported by the UN, we hope to increase student participation in school-wide events and activities to give students a public platform to voice concerns and discuss key ideas.
Through these programs, we hope to enhance our school environment by addressing these areas of improvement, as well as increase our individual awareness of social framework through the education and application of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Our next steps include continuing to recruit for the Student UN. While we had 30 people attend our first meeting, we want to make sure that we are reaching out to include every group on campus. We are using this forum to strengthen our student body by changing our own social framework within our school campus, as well as finishing a uniform mission and vision statement for the Student UN, hosting and supporting these upcoming events such as the Day of Wellness, various topics of concern by respective school groups, and various guests to address the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that are currently being presented. Finally, we plan on promoting the Student UN across multiple platforms so that students who are not able to attend the UN meetings are aware of the group and the goals that we have on campus. If students have something they wish to bring to the UN, this is a vehicle for them to do so. We are excited about these initiatives that we have introduced and know that in our effort in incorporating them into our school community, it will make us a more vibrant, inclusive, and dynamic campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dunaway, and to all the students, and also to the administration at Santa Barbara High School, Dr. Simmons here, and Assistant Principal Tiffany Carson, who I know supported this effort tonight. This would be a time for board comments and questions while the students are still there at the podium.
Board, any comments? Sure, which one of you guys going to work it out? Miss Dr. Reed?
Yes, I can't contain myself. I'm so excited. I think excellent work, excellent job. The process that you went through to unfold and understand the issues that you felt were really relevant was excellent. And I appreciate the voices and the work that the processes that you're going through. It's how the idea of a formation of a student UN. Had you heard about that at other districts, or is this something that you formulated on your own?
I took a summer/fall class at Santa Barbara City College called Global Leadership, and I learned about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and I really wanted to try and learn how we could incorporate those into our own campus, and it sort of just evolved from that.
Well, it's so exciting, and so next steps are just continuing to build on this process, it sounds like, and it sounds like you have a lot of buy-in from the students, from variety of groups that you really worked hard to be inclusive with. So I think this was the impetus behind putting this forward is to have something like this come back to us. And I really appreciate your time, the efforts that you are making, and I look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Miss Capps?
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to kind of get a better sense of how you combine the two groups. I'm a huge champion of sustainability on campus, so I'm thrilled that that you are bringing this and into formation. But in reading this over the weekend and hearing you speak now, how do the two goals fit together of increasing student interaction and then with the sustainability goals? Am I understanding that correctly? I just would love to hear kind of the decision process to combine these two efforts. And maybe more plainly put, for the 30 people that showed up, what do you think motivated them to come to the first meeting?
I think it all began with the district meeting we had here early in October and having the same goals in mind. From Lulu's meeting, we just kept the conversation going with the teachers and admin, and it all built together that we also had the same interests. And we just hope that over time the students will see that their voice can be heard at a school and that they'll see some change over time.
So I'm understanding that sort of with an emphasis on sustainability and the climate goals, that brings more voices together. So it's sort of two objectives. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yes, so the format of the UN is that it will create an environment where all students can come together, and then through that we can use the 17 Sustainable Development Goals as a goal to work together to try and help incorporate into our campus, versus just having a meeting where everyone is not agreeing on ways that we're running our campus. This way we can all work together to try and improve our campus.
That's fantastic. So I chair the subcommittee on sustainability here in our Wellness Council. So I'd love to stay in touch and certainly and learn about what you all are deciding are the objectives that you want to focus on first and begin touch in that way. So
That would be amazing.
great.
Dr.
So what I was really impressed with is you stated that this is a process and that the answer isn't necessarily going to come at the end of the year. So just speaking to Ms. Capps is the sustainability piece and the assurance that this is an ongoing process, that it may not resolve change right away, but that you have a strategy that you'll be working on to sustain that over time.
Yes.
Yes. So good luck.
Thank you.
Miss Munoz?
Yes, I applaud, your leadership and the grassroots movement from students. To have 30 at a meeting just to start with is amazing. recognize Morgan from forums that have been at Santa Barbara High School, and just really impressed by all of you and all how well thought out this was. And also including, participation, communication with staff on an ongoing basis. I think, I'm looking at the leaders here at the school, so I certainly, and very supportive of equity too on campus.
Thank you.
Right, so I just want to, I don't have to repeat, I can say ditto with regards to that. But I also, more importantly, just want to say thank you for your efforts and actually be able to see the fruition of the work that started in our student voices. And we just had, different conversations that was going on. So it's good to be able to see that. To also see the maturity of that, it's going to take some time to do it, but you're willing to stay the course to make sure that it happens. So much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, students. Good job. And we'll look forward to hearing from our next student board report at our next meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So are there any board comments and or correspondence we'd like to share? Dr. Reed?
All right, I miss a meeting, but I come back fully loaded with things to say, so I'll try to keep it brief. But I had the opportunity to go to the National School Board Association Equity Symposium and Advocacy Institute in Washington, D.C., thanks to the school district. And the Equity Symposium provided an opportunity for me to listen to a variety of speakers and attend workshops that focused on specifically eradicating discriminatory practices, prejudices, and beliefs in educational policy. So it was so great to hear from the student speakers because it just fits the framework of what the National School Board Association is trying to do in developing pathways to equity. One of the speakers, and I'm just going to give 4 comments that she made that just were really relevant and I think important to hear. Real equity is revolutionary, and own it. And I hear you all and the students owning it. Ask questions of the universe, of society, and then learn to live with those questions and answers. Examine society, try to change it, and fight it no matter the risk. And then her final comment, we are in a revolutionary situation. So essentially, equity is a process, but we need people to stand forward and stand behind their convictions around it. And so it was very impressive to hear these students today. I also had the opportunity to be a part of the Advocacy Institute, which the California School Boards Association, the National School Boards Association was very, a lot of work went in and knowledge to learn more about IDEA, DACA, Secure Rural Schools Acts, which are different projects that were supporting equity across our districts. And I had the experience, I just wanted to reiterate what the students had mentioned about meeting with Congressman Salud Carbajal. He was very receptive to all of the advocacy measures that we brought forward in terms of supporting IDEA, which is really about supporting special education in our districts. And DACA, which is, he was actually, what was a great story is he had planned to meet with me, and then he was called into the House of Representatives at that time to report on his beliefs around the new legislation or what's being put forward around DACA. And he came out of the meeting to speak specifically to me and say, that's what I'm in there talking about. So leave me alone, let me go back into my job. But no, he was very receptive. So it was a great experience. And what was wonderful to hear and see is people coming together across the country in support of these important issues and really reflecting and wanting to reflect on what can we do to make these equity paths more framed within our districts and within our communities. So I really appreciated this opportunity, and I'm not going to go on any further, just to say that to know that there are people in our government system that are supporting issues around equity and wanting to ensure that we can support the needs of students with disabilities is really great to know that we have this behind us nationally, but also here locally within our own district and in our community. So, thank you.
Additional comments? Okay. So next, we will be acceptance of donations for the February 12th, 2019. Do I hear a motion?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Public
yeah.
comments, I didn't see. We just got. Thank
Sorry.
you.
Yes, we do have a few public comments. We can start first. Let's see, I think we have 6. We can start first with Leslie Sanderson, followed by Paul Singer, followed by Kim Kotnick. And just to refresh, you have 3 minutes, and I'll give everyone a 30-second warning.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Leslie Sanderson. I'm a mother of a student receiving special education services at San Marcos High School. I am speaking to you in order to bring up a concern regarding the lack of paraprofessional staffing in my son's special education program. I've been emailing the site administration, special ed administration, district administration, school board, and getting often little or no response. This problem has been evident since the beginning of the school year, and we've still not been able to resolve the problem. The school year started off with a deficit of 4 paraprofessionals in just my son's special education class. Several were hired but ended up having multiple absences. One actually hired in October worked a total of 6 days. Daily, there have been between 2 and 4 absences out of total of 7 paraprofessionals in the class. We met with the assistant principal who said we could see new faces at the beginning of 2019. We have. The 2 newly hired paras that were absent most of the school year were gone. And then 4 positions were filled by Maxim temps. The Maxim temps have not been trained. The Maxim temps often don't show up. The Maxim temps often will be there for 1 day and then quit. Occasionally you get a good one that you can hire and keep as a permanent paraprofessional. The reason why this is important is my son, as well as all the other students in his class, require a one-on-one aid in order to attend their general education classes. So my son continues to miss educational and social opportunities by missing both his gen ed classes, as well as having to eat lunch in the special ed classroom. So to add insult to injury, I receive text messages and emails every time my son is absent from these general ed classroom opportunities, and it's because the district's not providing adequate staffing. Tonight you'll review and approve the school safety plans. I noticed there are sections that do include students with special needs, which is new, but how successful will these plans be when there's a lack of staff? To give an example, this last lockdown at San Marcos, Matthew's special education teacher was in an IEP. There were 4 paraprofessionals missing. All of the special ed students were on the track. And there really wasn't a way to contact them or find out or make sure that they were safe. Luckily, this was just a false alarm, and I shuddered to think what would happen in a real emergency. So the new mission is being discussed tonight as well. I would hope that the new mission could be to strive for the minimum. Strive for the minimum in staffing.
Thank you.
Strive for the minimum in training. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Singer, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Singer. I'm here to speak to you about the GATE programs at Washington Elementary and the GATE lottery selection process. I'm a parent of 2 sons who attend Washington Elementary. My older son is in the 4th grade GATE magnet program. My younger son is in the 2nd grade and is well down the list on the wait list, having gone through the lottery. I attended the lottery. I met Dr. Wagenik. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. I did raise these issues there, and I have had some communication with Dr. Wagenik. Since then, I just want to raise them with the board. I know there's been some progress with trying to accommodate these kids, but I want to make sure the board's aware of it. There are a number of parents of gate-identified children who are very concerned. First issue I want to raise is that there were some irregularities with the lottery process, and I don't understand how it happened, and I would like an explanation, although it doesn't appear I'm going to get one today. First, there were 42 kids gate identified. Like I said, I've gone through this process before with my older son, and my understanding is that in this past 2 years at least, there was not really a need for a lottery because there was only 25 kids identified, so it was not an issue. This year there were 42, which is such a huge increase, and I'm wondering if there's an explanation for that, whether the standards were changed, whether the selection program was different this year, different than what is published on the district website. I just want to make sure that this is a fair process for everybody, and so I'm hoping that's something that can be distributed to the parents, that question could be answered. The other issue I had what I thought was really strange was that the lottery is essentially drawing out of a hat, right? And so every student's name was on a piece of paper, except for 2 students who are apparently twins, and they were on one piece of paper. I don't know why that would be. It changed the odds, and it put every other student at a disadvantage, and I believe it was unfair. And that's the other issue that I've asked for and not received an explanation, and I would like to receive one. Finally, I just want to make sure that the board I see that I have 30 seconds. I just want to make sure that the board is aware that there are all the parents of the waitlisted children are trying to figure out what is going to happen with their kids, how the district is going to accommodate their needs for specialized education for the gifted and talented learners. There's a few more parents to speak on this same subject tonight, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And next we have Kim Kotnick, followed by Janice Z, followed by our last speaker, Kathy Swift.
My name is Kim Kotnick. I'm also the parent of a second grader waitlisted for a spot in the GATE magnet. And I just wanted to also bring this issue to the attention of everyone here. I want to thank the people who are already working on it, many of them sitting toward the back of this room, and just say that it would be wonderful if our district and our school could meet the needs of every student who is GATE identified. And at Washington, and I assume at other schools too, there are tons of parents who are ready to dedicate their time, their energy, their professional knowledge, skills, financial resources in ways that that's appropriate to help the district meet the needs of all of these kids. And I know that there are some efforts underway and policies in place that require on some level the district and Washington to deliver or devise something that is minimally compliant, a pull-out model, kids sitting at a metal table in the rain with other kids they don't know, and a external resource perhaps hired to help meet this need. And it's possible that a system like that would be minimally compliant, but I'm here to urge everyone to consider something that's more than that, something that's better, something that's more equitable, and also to engage the parent body to help you in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Janice C.
Hi everyone. I'm Janice Z. I'm the mother of Max Z, who is the second grader at Washington Elementary School. Before I present my issue, I would like to first express our deepest appreciation to you, our MIDE educators, because it's you build up the foundation of our children's elementary education. My husband, Tony Z, has been serving at UCSB, a professor of theoretical physics for almost 34 years. He always comes back home to say you are doing the most difficult and the challenging work to get our children inspired to learn and to learn further. So your work is often behind the scenes. Your work could incredibly change the lives of our children. So we repeat saying that you deserve much more credit than the public recognize. So I came here to raise an issue with our community community friends support. I regard it as a mistake. The big mistake that the lottery caused to the Washington Gate identified students. They should all deserve a seat in the GATE program. Why? In fact, we do not like the name of GATE. We do not need it either. GATE identified parents, GATE identified kids, GATE certified teachers. No, it's not. It's weird. But indeed, these kids have some special demand for learning like other special students too. For what? Because they're quick learner. They need help. Okay, that's the main issue. All right. So, but it's you label them and you categorize them and you can to test them and to notify them to be qualified. In our case, our son naturally thinks himself to be in the GATE program as you indicated to him. We knew less, but he knew more than we did from his dear friends, whom he met at his first grade friends at Washington Elementary School. So, could you separate them from the recesses? Can you separate them from the rep program? Could you separate them from enrichment program? No, you cannot. So for now, are you going to tell my son you cannot get into the GATE program like your dear friends because you have a bad luck?
30 seconds.
Okay. So my request to you, very simple. If the lottery is right or wrong, if you think it's right, let's invite all the parties involved for debate. If you agree it is wrong, please propose how you will remedy this mistake and with the timetable. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final public speaker will be Kathy Swift.
Hello. I'm speaking to a little different item on the agenda. Item number 6, the litigation from Fair Education against the school district and Just Communities. And I'm here tonight as a representative of Ethnic Studies Now to urge the school district to stay the course. We just, passed the Ethnic Studies curriculum, and so we're all very excited about that at Ethnic Studies Now. And we're dismayed by this lawsuit of Fair Education against the school district and Just Communities. So we're concerned that this lawsuit could negatively affect the development of a healthy ethnic studies curriculum, and we want to urge the district to stay the course with ethnic study and continue to foster educational partnerships with the community. Ultimately, ethnic studies is a civil rights issue, and we continue to look to the district for leadership on this. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Capps. Now we'll move to the acceptance of donations. Thank you for your patience. So do I hear a motion?
Yes, I move to accept with gratitude the donations.
Thank you.
I second it.
Second by Dr. Reed. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. So we're moving to the consent agenda. Are there any items that the board would like to pull from the consent agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Dr. Reed, do I hear a second? Ms. Munoz? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. That moves us to our action agenda, starting with student discipline. Ms. Capps?
In the case of 201819-21, move to accept the recommendation for full expulsion of one semester, which ends June 2019.
I second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we move into selection of the candidate in the 2019 California Schools Board Association, CSBA, Delegate Assembly in Subregion 11-A. Mr. Marcilga.
Locally, we get to vote on, I think, is it one or two candidates?
I think it's just
Just
one.
the one. I think in our area, Luz Reyes Martin, who is willing to serve as a delegate assembly member for CSBA. So we pass that vote recommendation on to the board.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve Ms. Martin as the region delegate?
So moved.
Dr. Reed, do I hear a second?
Second.
Ms. Capps, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Next, we'll move to the approval of the mission, vision, core values for the Santa Barbara Unified School District. Mr. Matsuoka.
So at the last board meeting, we had I would say, a rich discussion about the statements. We did focus on the vision statement as needing some language that would make more sense to parents, I think even to students, because the last one was readiness for college, it was college career readiness. And so with that input, we did craft a variation of the vision statement. So Mr. Rickman, if you could just scroll down a little bit. Back up. There it is. Stop. Students read, reason, and communicate to contribute positively to an ever-changing world. There was sentiment from the board to try to connect the vision statement to the mission statement. The mission statement does speak about getting ready for a world that obviously is changing rapidly. So the vision statement is more tied to our instructional work, read, reason, and communicate. But we are proposing that language to connect it to the mission statement. So I would offer that for board conversation and then invite your approval of these three important statements.
Board, anyone have any comments? Any additional comments? Ms. Capps?
Well, I just appreciated our discussion in the last meeting and that those thoughts from the board have been incorporated now into the vision statement. And I think it's reads well and is a crisp vision statement and mission statement and core values.
Dr. Reed?
Yes, I had the opportunity to watch the video and enjoyed the conversation. I do appreciate the succinctness of the message. And I actually, it was great because when I'm out in the community or when I'm somewhere, I was actually in DC, I could say what the mission statement was. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I know it's on the back wall here, but there's no way I can repeat that out. So I think this is a great move forward, and I appreciate it. I think it's a good move. Thanks.
Additional comments? Ms. Munoz?
I think the vision statement is dynamic and it reflects, what we're seeing in the world around us. I think it's perfect from my
Okay.
perspective.
Thank you. I don't need to say anything other. Can I hear a motion? Do I hear a motion for approval?
Sure, so moved.
Ms. Capps, do I hear a second?
Second.
Dr. Reed, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you for your work on this. So this is the normal time we take a break, but we're going to keep on moving. So we'll be going to our report and discussion agenda and approval of the school safety plans.
While we're waiting, I want to thank all of our principals who are out in the audience. I know you have many tasks to do. We felt it's important for you to be here tonight because there's been a significant amount of work on these safety plans. You have felt it. We have watched you. We appreciate all the hard work that you've put into it. And we just, once in a while, we want the board to see our cohort of principals among us.
Sorry, Mr.
We have
Rickman.
the substitute audiovisual driver tonight.
I realize the non-break kind of threw you off there, but we'll give you a little time to catch up.
I'm going to go ahead and
Please. Go
and
ahead.
start us off because
Yes.
actually I don't require any of the slide deck.
Okay.
Thankfully, I will take the opportunity once again to thank the board for their commitment to the position of our safety coordinator position. So Mr. Kelly Moore is going to take over the bulk of this presentation, and we are going to have 3 of our principals, 1 elementary, 1 junior high, and 1 high school, Veronica Binkley, David Ortiz, and Bill Woodard, give a brief summary of the process that their schools have been through, but I'll echo what Mr. Matsuoka said, and it's really, I was sitting here thinking how nice it is to see all the principals here, because this really is, as Mr. Moore has reminded me time and time again, these plans are not an end result. This is a living, breathing document that will continue to work, but there are blood, sweat, and tears in these plans in terms of the effort that went into creating them. So Education Code 35294.6 requires that each public school in the state of California maintain a comprehensive school safety plan that's relative to the unique needs and resources of that school site. So while you will see in the plans that there are many, many pieces that look the same, each plan is definitely unique. It's also required that that plan be written and developed by either a school site council or a safety planning committee from those schools. And those are to include parent input as well as input from local law enforcement agencies. Two of our district core values are to evaluate our work and improve our practices. And the addition of the school safety coordinator has allowed Santa Barbara Unified to undertake the work of implementation of processes and procedures for evaluating, improving, and strengthening our school safety management plans and incident response. And the principals are here tonight. There will be opportunity for question and answer, and I hope that you will take the opportunity to ask questions of any of the principals who are here tonight, because we do want to continue to evaluate that work and improve our practices. So with that, I will go ahead and turn the report over to Mr. Moore. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I think there were more tears than blood and sweat, but it was a good process for us all. I learned an awful lot going through this process, and I want to relay one of my biggest mantras is we can't do this alone, and we have to touch on every aspect of school behavior, school safety, discipline, and how to respond in that failure of that. And that's what this kind of depicts, is the relationship of having school safety as a general concept. Is we have to have kids that feel safe, parents that feel safe bringing their kids to school. We have to have a safe community, and we have to bring all of these together in order to have a good safety program within our area. So this was the process that I used. I started July 16th, I think it was, doing an assessment of the current plans and what they were. And what I found was a very robust safety plan, and it lacked continuity between all of and standardization between all of the different sites. So with that assessment, we started working towards what do we need and what's the plan and so forth. From the plan and based upon the assessment needs, then we looked at how we were going to train, how we were going to drill and exercise, and how we were going to perform. And then this is a continuous process. So the assessment, we talked with people. I went to each school before the school year started and talked with the administrators, reviewed their plans, and we looked at the types of drills and the manner in which they were being conducted. With that, research that we did with the assessment, I looked at what was needed. And I kept the current plan because that really kind of stepped outside of my area of expertise in the policies and the discipline and creating a safe environment for our kids and our staff. And it ticked off all of the major requirements put down by the state. But I did take two little components out of that, and that was the emergency response and the disaster preparedness. And that's really the bulk of the change of what you're going to see in these plans. So I really fortified the current plan. And we'll look at that a little bit more when we talk about the components of the plans. In an attempt to standardize our responses, we, the board, accepted and implemented the standard response protocol. So we went through some training with that, and to this date, all of the school sites have been trained in the standard response protocols. And in fact, a few of our schools have actually implemented them in real life situations. And I think they're working well for us. And then I added some components that were missing or lacking in their depth. So, like I said, we trained the educators, administrators, and we're working on pushing that down to the students. We did the train the trainer class with the SRPs, the standard response protocols. And I'm working with our emergency responders to train them on how we are going to respond and react to emergencies and trying to put all that together. You'll see a couple of bullet points in blue, and those are things that are still coming towards the end of this year and into the summer. So we're going to be doing some tabletop exercises with the administrations. We're going to start looking at emergency functioning training through the ICS process, the incident command system, and so forth. And then in the summer, in fact, on Thursday, I have a meeting to start the development of a full-scale exercise for an active shooter at 2 different campuses so that we can get the school sites involved with the emergency response and those protocols, and we can kind of titling this exercise start to finish so everyone can see exactly how this would transpire. And then we'll have the full-scale exercises, and then we'll see how we perform, and as a part of that, we'll do an after-action review, which will then start us through that process all over again and have that planning loop, as we say. We'll learn from our mistakes and we'll correct them and keep going. And in fact, we've already started the discussion for refining the plan that you guys haven't yet approved. So that's already going. So hurry up. So what is the plan? For the most part, it's a living document. It's a plan, not the plan. And what I mean by that, it's presented before you, but it's not going to look the same next year. So it's going to continue to go. We're not settling with this, and we know that there's a lot of things that need to be worked on, and some of the stuff, the conversation that needs to take place is so extensive that we just couldn't get it done in time, but we will do that, and that a lot of that centers around the response for the access and functional needs community and how we're going to take care of them. And others is just processes that really need to be ironed down for each specific site. We'll talk a little bit about what the components are in just a little bit, and what we do as a district and how we can assist the individual sites and how we're working together and trying to break down the silos between the different school sites that are kind of autonomous right now, the culture, and how in emergency response and planning, how we have to rely on each other to fortify that response and work through the efficiencies, because an affected site is going to be too busy to do all of those functions. And then what's next for us as a district is really going through this, looking at best practices, trying to figure out how we can lead not only our district, but the communities and the county, the districts within the county, so that we can really have a solid response countywide, and it doesn't matter where your child goes in this county. And we're going to lead that, whether we have to kick and scream all the way there, but we're going to get there. So this is the documents that are compiled and make up the plan. So you'll see the cover packet, and the cover packet is generally It includes the table of contents, identify key school officers, some maps, some phone numbers, that kind of things, required signature pages. The school safety plan is the next component, and that's really what everyone's used to seeing as a school safety plan. It's that component with those two little pieces taken out. Then the emergency operations plan, and that's really the crux of what we took care of this year. And attached to that, you'll have the functional appendices, functional checklist, and then school site specific checklist. So the functional appendices are really, how do you do something? Duck cover or hold is one of those. Just as an example, it's really more of a how-to type directional appendices. The functional checklist is those components that you need to do. So in a fire, you need to shut off gas lines, you need to call 911, those types of things you need to evacuate. And it's checklists and making sure you understand what it is that you need to do. And then the school site specific, those are the bell schedules that are unique to each school. The evacuation zones for each school, bell schedules, master schedules, and those types of things for each school. So those are housed there. So what we do and what I do is I gave everyone these templates essentially, and then I acted as a sounding board. So we talked through some of the problems. It would have been easy for me to sit down and just fill them all out. But really, this is a learning process for everybody, and to get buy-in, and so that people understand what's expected of them and get rid of the culture of having a plan just to check off the boxes for to qualify or to account for state mandates, but really trying to figure out what it is that it's expected for us to do. We're holding group discussions. We do that quite regularly. We continue to talk with each other, and then really what we're doing, especially going from our area to the county area, operational area, I guess, is working on crisis communication, interoperability, and this little gem down here that we're going to get this started, whether it's me or somebody else by the time I leave, but we're going to get this going. And this is a school threat assessment response team. And I'm having a little pushback from people, but I think it's more lack of understanding. But we're going to get there. The school side really looks at it as a good thing. I'm having a little bit more difficulty from the law enforcement and emergency response side. But we'll get there with that. And that's really developing a good, solid process so that once we get a threat to any school, no matter how it comes to us, that we have a process that people can feel confident in, and we can make good, sound judgments, and knowing that they're all different. But it's the process that counts. Board approval, hopefully, before this. The safety committee will conduct an after-action view, and in fact, we've already begun that process. Alice is it's not a new concept, it's new to us, but it really gives you options during active shooter and what they call violent critical incidences. So it gives us the ability to really have an option and how to respond to those types of threat rather than just waiting for somebody to come rescue us. Summer active shooter response training, start to finish. And we're going to continue to work with our first responders in having outreach to the community so that we're going to start teaching hands-on only CPR and stop the bleed to parents and our staff so that we can really enhance our community's resilience and their ability to respond not only during a school situation but any situation. So going back to this is kind of the idea of what was there for the umbrella of the concept for the plan itself. And I wanted to make sure that when I was looking at this, I considered these things and understanding that each one of these is a different silo that touches on how our teachers, our community parents, and students feel about the safety and the confidence of the schools. So with that, I think I'm done. We'll save questions for later.
So at this point, I'd like to ask our principals to come up. I believe Mr. Woodard is going to start us off. If you'll click to the next slide, please. I believe he's first. Next slide after that one. There you go. Oh, that's Harding. Never mind, Ms. Binkley, you're first. I forgot which order I put them in.
Hello, members of the board, superintendent, assistant superintendents, thank you for having us here. So this marks my 5th year in the Santa Barbara Unified School District, and I've written many safety plans. I will say that our prior practice was not really aligned with each other. My colleagues and I really didn't consult too much on what we had in our plans. Wasn't really aligned with emergency support agency. The safety plans that I wrote had some response protocol in it, and it was taken a lot from other districts that I've worked from. There were regular drills. Oftentimes, if our SRO was, or our school resource officer was on site and they were available to accompany us in the drills, they would support us, but it wasn't regular, it wasn't systematic. So with this plan now that we have, we are absolutely aligned. The language in the plans are aligned also with our emergency support agencies. The plans are comprehensive. There is an emergency operations plan and a response to protocol with the hazard and threat specific appendices that you heard Mr. Moore speak about. Our drills are specific. The scenarios kind of elicit a sense of urgency, that the staff definitely take the drills more seriously, and we are absolutely engaging with our support agencies and our parents. I will say that our safety plan in creating this also feels a sense of urgency to get more training, because when they're on a list of somebody who might be in charge of operations or in charge of logistics, they're anxious to find out what that actually means. So if I was to say what our next steps should be, it would be to get training for our staff that are in those critical positions to assure that everything will be handled smoothly and without incident. So, I did forget one thing.
Yes,
I
you
did.
did.
I did. I'm sorry. I wasn't looking at my notes. We have this year taken kind of an extra step to assure that our students feel safe, and because, as Dr. Wagenet would say, if the students don't feel safe, they're not safe. So we have really embarked upon a robust social and emotional learning multi-tiered system of support. We've been able to work with various agencies, specifically UCSB and Santa Barbara Alliance for Community Transformation, that have been working in conjunction with us to write grants to afford us extra counselors. Currently, we have over 25 friendship groups and grieving groups, and just support for children that are experiencing a need to learn more about how to get along and how to deal with their own trauma and stress. So that's been very successful. We've had some benchmark data and just taken a second round. We've assessed every child in the school, and we're seeing a vast reduction of students that need extra support and students that feel, actually, it's quite sweet, the emotion that is not as prevalent as it was in the beginning of the year is loneliness. So kids are not feeling lonely anymore. They're feeling like they want to be there. They're feeling a part of the team. So that's all been well received, and we look forward to continuing with that as well.
Thank you. All right. Can we wait to the end and then we'll call them up? That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Ortiz?
They're worried.
They should be.
Thank you, Dr. Wagenknecht, for the 30 minutes that you've allotted me this evening. Oh. Mr. Moore mentioned a mantra. Ours is, if you do that which is essential, you are. And how essential is safety? Our why is, we have to be ready. And I was reflecting, and I cannot remember when this was not a priority. It has always been a priority at La Colina. We've always had a great deal of input from our school community. We've always had an active committee. We have 2 fantastic co-chairs, an assistant principal, Carol Navarez, and a health assistant, Wendy Landeros. So that being said, we've done the planning, the organization. We've had the training. We had virtually everybody go through a CERT training program. We have had monthly drills for years. We've had assessment not only internally, but through our district and through outside agencies. And that has been critical to get an outside perspective and then the opportunity to revise our plan. Integral has been our alert team. And so everybody on campus has a specific role. When we had the mudslides and debris flow last year, and we had all these agencies descending on La Colina, they came to me and said, what are all those people doing out there? They were in alert mode. It happened. This year has been a challenging experience. We have everybody trained, as Mr. Moore stated. We've updated to the new protocols. We've learned some new vocabulary, but we've also retained a lot of our past practice. It has not been a heavy lift for La Colina. That's because we've been doing this all along. Imperative in the future is the work with our parent community. We have to be aligned, and actually in the first bullet, again, connecting with leadership in our district, our sister schools, and networking within our community. When something happens, again, going back to the beginning, we have to be ready as an entire community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz. Mr. Woodard?
Good evening. I would echo what Mr. Ortiz said. It's always been a priority. I think the difference this year has been the intentionality of what we're doing now. So we've always written safety goals. We certainly know it's on the minds of our students and our families. We've conducted drills in the past, again, monthly. And we've created safety plans, but I will be frank, sometimes they were feeling like check the box. And, you know, as I said, it's on the minds of our kids. I was looking at the California Healthy Kids Survey data from last year and what just came in this year. And last year at my school, there's been a drop of 8% in students who say they feel very safe at school. And you reflect on what happened since they took that survey, was the mudslides, was Parkland, was Thousand Oaks. And certainly our students are feeling that, especially our teenagers, I think. So this year, I love that we have district-wide language and systems for responding to our emergencies. The language, the vocabulary is consistent. We're doing monthly drills with scenarios and with a lot more intentionality. And what I like is that they're now being evaluated by outside agencies, which is really important. So either Deputy Hendricks, our SRO, or first responders from the fire department. We wanted to do a drill this year at lunch because an emergency can happen at lunch. We had never drilled at lunch. So I called Kelly and said, hey, Kelly, can you come out on this day? We're going to drill for a lockdown at lunch. What would happen with 2,000 teenagers at lunch? And that was really helpful. He came on right out. He was there, and he gave us feedback on how that drill went, and that we evaluate our drills every time now to see how we can get better, to improve our practices every time. I think that is bleeding over to our students who are feeling that now. They're feeling that we're taking these more seriously. Our teachers are taking it more seriously. And that standard response protocols that come from the I Love You Guys National Foundation, it's really good practices and it's really clear. So we're really excited about having that and getting better as we go forward. Future plans, we want to onboard and train and educate all of our 9th graders every year early, because an emergency can happen very quickly, and monthly drills throughout the year are great, but what happens if we have a drill or emergency in late October and we haven't had a chance to drill with our students? So we're going to try to take the PSAT day when our 10th and 11th graders are taking that test and really do some more detailed training for all of those students about the SRP, and then also looking at other things like bullying, social emotional learning, how to access the Stop It app in case you want to report something. Myself and Mr. Ortega are very excited about the bell and PA systems that are coming to our schools, hopefully this summer, Mr. Vizzolini, correct? Correct. All right. And then we are going to host this summer an active shooter training at DPHS. So those are the updates. Thank you.
So at this point, I do want to say, before we turn it over for questions, and I'm sure the board has many, and again, we had the 3 presentations, but all of the principals are here ready to answer any questions you have specific to them, and I would invite them, if they feel led, to respond. We can do call and response on this too, because they have answers to give as well, that we these have been used. So the standard response protocols. Ms. Fresh had a car on fire pull into the parking lot several weeks ago, right before dismissal, and put the school on lockout. Dr. Simmons had a pursuit of a burglary down on Nopal, right behind the softball field, and put the school on lockout, and the assailants were actually on the campus, I believe, when they were found. And then most recently at San Marcos High School last week, we had the lockdown. And the systems are working. And all the feedback that we're getting, and the most important feedback really is from students and parents, has been that, wow, that went really well. And so that's because that goes back to, if you're not truly safe until you feel safe. And I think our students and parents, it's going to take some time, but are feeling safer. So with that, I'll open it up for questions and comments from the board.
Dr. Reed, you had a question you were holding on to?
Yes. Actually, it's for Ms. Binkley, if you wouldn't mind coming to the microphone.
Yes, anyone who's going to answer will need to come to the microphone.
So, thank you.
Sure.
So one of the beauties of your school are the bridges.
Yes.
And one of the challenges of your school are the bridges. So when we were there for a coffee with the board, it was actually right prior to, I believe, Kelly Moore coming,
Right.
Mr. Moore, to the school to talk about looking and assessing. Maybe that was the first day of assessing. But one of the conversations that came out, or actually the parents in that group started discussing their fear around the bridges and the safety. And so I was curious, because I know that Mr. Moore was coming after that meeting, if you had devised a plan or what processes that went forward with that. And are parents involved in that discussion? Have they had an opportunity since our meeting with the coffee with the board? Thank you.
Yeah, I have worked with our ELAC and to explain our safety plan, and it continues to be a concern because the nature of those bridges are such that there are 4 ramps that go up to the bridge and then lead to 2 doors, which are generally open because students are going back and forth. what we have done during our lockouts and lockdowns are we've used part of the packet that was provided for us through the I Love You Guys Foundation, and they are large posters that when we do lock out and lock down, we place on the outside of those doors that let parents know that they can't come out or in, and we lock the doors as well. I did speak with Kelly about, the idea of putting something, a locked gate on either side of those bridges. It just it doesn't seem reasonable to the extent that people come and go all the time to get their kids and deliveries and such. It's a problem. It's something that I think we're going to have to work on as a team. But we have a check-in system where parents check into the office, and people that are delivering, they check into the office. Everybody wears a badge. All staff are aware that if there's somebody wandering around that doesn't have a badge on, we ask them to check into the office. So,
do you feel that? Do you feel that that's the best you can do? I know that some of the parents, and maybe that's just an iterative conversation to come back to, because some of the parents were saying that just they didn't feel necessarily comfortable with the fact that these people were having access to the bridges and they didn't know who they were. And you couldn't necessarily put a lock gate there because
Right.
they have to come in. But I just don't know. I mean, it's a big question mark, I guess, still,
Yeah.
that needs to be thought about.
Yeah. It's something that we definitely have to look into. It's a community school. We do have, it is a closed campus. Gates are locked during the school day. However, students do have to cross that bridge to get back and forth because our cafeteria is on one side and there are students on the other side. And so, it continues to be a concern. However, we do feel as though the adults are monitored, and
Do you have, I'm just curious, would you have something in place where some volunteers could be during the day that would, I don't know, that are on campus, the
yard duty personnel?
Yeah, that would.
Sure, we patrol. The yard duty personnel patrol. They have a walking route that they do, and so there hasn't yet to be a problem. That there's been anybody on site that is not accounted for. So we'll just continue to monitor and work with Kelly to see if there's anything further we can do. We keep our gates locked, and students really stay in. So.
Okay, well,
I wish I had something more
Yeah.
succinct. It's a conundrum, actually, an architectural one.
Right. Well, thank you. I just know it did become a big question and
Right.
evolved into more of a discussion that I was hoping there would be more follow-through.
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
No, please.
One of our biggest challenges and biggest advantages are the beauty of our campuses and the culture that we've allowed or accepted over generations. We have one campus, I think affectionately referred to as 44 acres of freedom. I won't tell you who told me that. But really, security comes down to people. And they're challenging, and they're noticing, and they're reporting what they're seeing when something's out of whack or out of place. And it really comes down to that. And the Harding School, that bridge is actually, I don't believe, it's a city bridge. It's a school district bridge, but it was placed there for pedestrian safety or something because of the split campus. So we own that problem. And the best we can do is train our people to respond correctly and appropriately. So we're getting there. That's a cultural change that we'll get to.
Thank you. And thank you. I just feel like since it was brought up, I just wanted, and I was right there, have to follow up on that. But I do think that maybe that's something to talk about and continue to, in this iterative process that you're going through, what could be a successful or strategy in placing, maybe there's parent volunteers that can be involved. I don't know, but I would hope that you might look forward and look into that.
Of course, of course.
Thanks.
Any additional comments from board members? Ms. Capps?
Well, thank you, Dr. Wagner and Commander Moore. It's sort of a night and day difference of this process, and I really appreciate it. If we all remember, last year, the board sort of reluctantly approved these plans, kind of sending them back to get improved upon, and I read all of them on one afternoon and just felt as a parent like, yikes, this didn't make me feel so great. Knowing that probably a lot of things were in place, but just the plan part of it wasn't as taken with as intentionality, to use Mr. Woodard's phrase, as could be. And so really a night and day difference. Just even the fact that all of you principals are here shows, after a long day that you've already done, to be here and to show how important this is and to communicate that out to our community by the fact that these safety plans, sure, they're required by the state, but they are an opportunity to get everybody aligned, and that's what we have here. And it feels so much better to know that the plan, which are iterative, actually do mirror and have been taken as full advantage, as is clear by this presentation, to match what's happening and to make sure that the opportunity is not just to check the box because the state requires this and the board has to ratify this by March 1st, but because we're taking this seriously as an opportunity to get alignment. So I have a couple questions, but again, just in that spirit of gratitude, again, as a parent, to know that all of these steps are being put into place for our kids. These are two questions for the principals, and so they're for anybody who feels like answering. But the first would be, from the parent perspective, it was communicated to me last year that it's even challenging to get some parents to participate in these committees, understandably. So I'm just curious if that's changed, or any experiences of parent involvement, if that led to any concrete difference. And also the twofold part of that would be, how would these plans then be communicated to parents? We had some discussion last year about, transparency and situations like that. Obviously, this is all public documents now that we're having this board meeting, which is a good thing. But my question is really about parent involvement, and I open it up to any of the principals to answer. Thanks.
I think the promotion of the shared leadership model and trying to be as transparent, just upfront and honest in its ongoing messaging and recruitment of people. We addressed this concern, this plan, at PTSA, ELAC, CPAC, ASB Student Council, every opportunity, and encourage people to get involved and have an ongoing committee. So it's really a shared leadership process. And our message is, as we build capacity and broaden the scope of that capacity, we're going to be that much better off. So again, our parents from all backgrounds like to get involved, as well as our students and our staff. So
if you had to name one thing in your campus that you hear mostly about in terms of safety from your parents, what would that be?
Well, the one message that I shared with you folks and these folks out here through the years is that we are contractual. And what I would remind people, if you can establish your foundation and stick to it, be contractual about your plan. And that's what they really appreciate and feed off of. And once we get all these protocols down and we get people trained, and again, we have to be contractual about the implementation and the follow through. This is going to be a tremendous asset, not only to our school district, but to our community in general.
Any other principals want to speak to the parent involvement? Great. Yeah, more than one's great.
Good evening, board, superintendent, assistant superintendents. It's kind of exciting. I wanted to share because in the past, we've had a lot of parent suggestions and questions, but not necessarily people who wanted to be part of our safety team. So we were approached by a few different parents this year, which was really nice because it gives you, that perspective that you don't always have being inside. And then the second part of your question, we are really excited because in the classroom, it started to help teachers have hard conversations because our students are now having these scenarios and they're talking about things in elementary school. Kids have a lot of questions that we may not have thought of as adults. You assume they know things and they don't always know things. So our parents being involved has been great. It's giving us a different perspective. It's given our teachers a different perspective. And it just feels a lot more uniform. And it also helps us to feel safer, so.
Thanks, Ms. Bazemore. Since I have you up here, was there during this process, was there something that kind of stood out to you that, like kind of a breakthrough of a new protocol or something that's more efficient now going forward?
Something actually that helped a lot was when Mr. Moore came early in the school year and we walked around our campus. We at Roosevelt, if you haven't been, we're very fortunate. Our campus is completely locked. So there is, like 2 acres. It's very small of like no out and about freedom, which really makes us feel safe. I can step out and I can see my entire campus in one view. Something that did arise was the fact that Emerson, which is a street above our school, is very open. And so when we started to have these conversations in our safety committee and with parents, they're like, oh my gosh, I never realized you can see the entire campus from off campus, which is a little uncomfortable. So it did raise some new concerns that we hadn't thought about before.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, everybody. So just to respond to the parent engagement, our school site council is very much involved in our safety plan development. And one change that we did with our safety plan this year is we invited our parents to come and experience the drills. So we invited several parents to have that experience, and they did attend. Several parents did show up. And they were also involved in debriefing sessions where we evaluate through the protocols that Kelly provides us, and they provide input back to the school on how we can improve. And the last thing I want to mention is we also we send out Parent Square notifications to our parents to let them know that we are drilling and what the drill is about, just kind of a quick synopsis. And we also communicate to it's created opportunities for us to communicate to our students as well what these events are for and why we practice them. So it's been a great educational experience for everybody, and but it's created more questions, more thought-provoking questions from a lot of folks, which is great.
I think that's a wonderful idea to have parents come, just having experienced at Mr. Garcia's school a lockdown scenario myself, and I just learned a lot. So I think that's fantastic that you do that with your parents. Thank you.
Dr. Reed.
Yeah, I think these ideas that you brought forward are really great ideas, like what you did at DP with the lunch, having it happen at lunchtime, the 9th grade, starting it before, right when school starts. So I'm hoping that these ideas are shared out so that what really works well and are successful, or just innovative challenges, like this worked well or it didn't, but giving that information across the district relational to these types of, I think, innovative ways of thinking, because it doesn't always happen, everybody's in class and it's not in the opportune moment typically. So I want to commend those innovative ideas and hope that those are shared out on a consistent basis, maybe gathering that together and sharing the information so that there's other approaches that people might suggest or we can admire and commend at the same time.
Dr. Reed, can I just respond to
Yeah.
that piece? And that is to give some information that this year we began a district safety committee. So Mr. Moore oversees that, and all secondary schools are represented. So they share ideas in that setting and talk about issues. And then the elementary principals, because they are the lone wolves on their school sites, are always welcome to participate. So those ideas are shared, and also Mr. Moore held a number of quote study sessions for the plans where the principals could come and work together and, ask questions and share ideas and do that in collaboration.
Great. So actually, I have a question for you, Mr. Moore. First of all, thank you for all the work that you've done. And I also appreciate all of you being here because I know you're thinking this is going to be an early meeting, but wait. No, but thank you for being here and for what you're doing. So what I just wanted to ask is I just don't understand. What are tabletop exercises?
So those are really, it depends, they can be very extensive or they can be just discussions. A tabletop exercise, you literally sit around a table. And I'll give you an example of what we have done in the past with the Sheriff's Department and what we will bring, and we've discussed this as well. So I acquired essentially a game that revolves around active shooter incident management. And I got the manufacturer of the game to do the game board as DP High School. So we have the ability to play through scenarios at DP High School. And we roll dice and we move pieces around and we can figure out exactly what's happening, and then we can start asking the tough questions. What are you responsible for now? Who should you be calling? What's going to happen? Those types of things. Other more or less, I should say, involved are just, let's throw out a scenario and start talking about it. What is your responsibility as a principal? What is your responsibility as a assistant principal? Bring it to cabinet. What are their responsibilities? So that's what a tabletop is.
So thank you. And so full-scale exercises are shooter protocols?
We have an actual response. The one that we're going to discuss on Thursday will start with hopefully volunteers in a classroom acting as teachers and students, and we will have a perpetrator come onto campus and give some indication that there is a violent act occurring. Then they'll be required to make notifications. We will have law enforcement respond, we will have fire respond, and they will actually physically go through the motions.
Okay, and one final question, and if you can't, you talk about this being an iterative process. So what key areas after your assessment of this year, where you are today, would you think that you need to focus on in this cycle going forward?
So some of it is just with the structure of the plan itself. It's pretty clunky, but we were bringing a bunch of different components together. So we're going to get that a little bit more user-friendly for everybody, try to bring that down a little bit. But we're also really going to focus on the areas where there's processes that are more involved, and we really have to, as a district, have to have that discussion on our standard reunification methods and those things. Where are we going to do that? How are we going to do it on the campus? We're not, so I'll just give you that. You can answer that one on your test. If you have something happen on a campus, you can't use that as a reunification site. So we'll have to use an alternate site, but we have to figure out how we're going to get our students there. We're going to have to figure out how to get the parents there. We're going to have to do things that right now, currently, the infrastructure that's in place is pretty challenging.
So thank you, and I would say if anyone will figure it out, you will, and we are so lucky to have you.
We will.
The team. The team. We'll go for the team. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Ms. Capps?
Not so fast. Thanks, Mr. Moore. I just, because we have you here, literally 1 week after a big scare, I was hoping you could speak to what happened at San Marcos High School and what you feel comfortable in terms of, I appreciated your earlier comments that we always are learning here, and we learn from every situation, whether it's a burning car in your parking lot or what we had with a very conscientious student who thought she saw a gun in the parking lot and she did the right thing. So could you speak to what happened last Tuesday and any lessons that might inform these plans going forward or this process going forward?
So we've had, San Marcos has already completed the first iteration of a after action review, and So there was some communication issues that were there. I think some of the stuff that I'll first go through what worked very well. I watched the video today. From the time that the student saw and it was very evident on video, saw what she believed was a gun, to the time that there was law enforcement presence was less than 3 minutes. So to me, that's validation that this is working, right? The culture is starting to shift. And so we, over the summer, we had placed several cameras, and we had one that showed the entire incident for the most part, and there is no question that she did the right thing. If we had had 24-hour monitoring, which we don't, and somebody saw what was happening, you would say, I think he's got a gun in his hand. Again, that validates. I didn't go to the school. I went to the command post for the sheriff's side to act as that conduit between the emergency response and the school itself. So we had our interests covered. And so that worked very well. There was some communication. You're playing telephone, so some information gets relayed incorrectly or interpreted incorrectly. So there are those challenges. I will say that in one particular case, the school had information from the command post before the deputies did. So that shows the value of us in trying to get messaging out and getting contact with the teachers and the students and saying, hey, this is where we're at and this is what we think we have. So we're still going to be on lockdown, but we believe we're okay. So just relax for a little bit and we'll still have to validate everything and verify. So that worked very well. Some of the things that didn't work well were some of the teachers didn't take it seriously. And some of the students were literally FaceTiming while this was going on. I think that there were some thoughts that we don't hear anything, so nothing's really happening. It's not real because we're not hearing any indicators, right? We did already put into process to correct the lack of communication about the safety plans to the other ancillary staff, the facilities and maintenance people. We had an incident that caused that to kind of bring it forward. So we're going to train them next week on all of that so that they can expect what's going to occur in something like this and what we expect them to do. And then we'll start looking at the food services and those types of things.
Well, thank you. That mirrors what I've heard from parents, just how well it was handled from the moment of the lockdown to the communication that went out afterwards, which was very thorough. These are parents who've been through a lot, and so I just appreciate that they really saw a process in action that was working. The one point that I did hear was a lack of curtains in some of the classrooms in the library, so you can't have an effective lockdown. I understand that those are in process apparently.
Right, so that's something that they're very expensive, right?
Sure.
So we're in the process of correcting that and then looking at a long-term solution for that. But yeah, we're looking at all of those things.
And then what Ms. Sanderson mentioned tonight of with special ed students and staffing information, I think that's a really important point that we need to make sure that with these plans that it incorporates the staffing of special ed.
Yeah, so we have a whole plan, and
Sure.
it's really just trying to train people to that plan. This is a long process. I talked to Dr. Wagnick this morning. This is really, we're at the first milepost of a very long journey. We've taken several steps to get here, but we're still at the beginning of this evolutionary process. We learned a lot from that none of us have ever dealt with. When I say none of us, I mean me. Have ever dealt with was during a crisis from a law enforcement and emergency response perspective, we don't really understand how children and students with special needs, how they're going to react to that. And there were some situations that made law enforcement rethink how they're going to do that. And so we're having that discussion because it's very difficult to literally to contain some of these students in an area for any given time, right? So we have to try to figure a way maybe to expand that area and protect it, but still allow them to have some movement, and so that they can kind of process it at their rate, but still be secured by having force protection around them.
Well, thank you. I thought to myself last Tuesday, thank goodness that you're in this job and that we've created this position. And I just want to reiterate that. I mean, in a short time, you've had such an impact. And again, to our principals for taking this so seriously and being here this evening, and all the work that went into these very lengthy plans and the work that is going to continue. I'm just very grateful. Thanks. Thank you.
Additional comments? They don't all have to be tonight. We have a long road to go, so.
Yeah, just real brief. I value, the participation of all the principals to be here as the new school board member. It's amazing to see this, and very pleased. And the involvement of and preparation for the students, parents, and staff, and the communication, to lessen the anxiety, with safety and mental health needs of our students are foremost of all the students, including, of course, special education students. I think this is awesome to see.
Great. I just have a final comment. I seem to be echoing all the comments, so I don't want to have to repeat those. So thank you, guys. So I just wanted to say that went to the back to school night. Mr. Moore, you were there, and I thought that was an excellent back to school night, upbeat and everything. I think that certainly is because of the fact that it was handled so well and people felt less anxiety as a result of that. But you may recall afterwards there was a parent who was, expressing his fear when he heard what was happening at San Marcos. And what I appreciate is that your just ability to lessen his anxiety by giving very clear and concise an explanation of what we did in terms of that and how it was minimized, because everybody knew what to do. So I want to express that appreciation. And I just want to say that level right there is he was at a gas station essentially when he heard the news. And the first thing he said was, I want to go and take my child out. Mm-hmm. And so as you explained to him, it lessened his anxiety, but it also informed him and educated him that as a parent, if you know what's going on at the school, you can lessen that. You might be still anxious, but certainly there are procedures and policies in place to keep our kids safe. And so I appreciated that. And we also had another, call with regards to, high anxiety of what's going on. But it just feels different, even this year, as Ms. Capps talked about this time last year, we're going over safety plans and we're just doing it. But it feels different. I certainly know that has to do with things that has happened in the last year, but it feels different. That's much more collaborative, and we're really taking it even more seriously, but in a way that how do we improve it as we start this first mile, as you said,
right,
in a long road to go.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. One of the things that we need to really put down as the foundation is having confidence with our staff. Once we get the confidence that we are going to respond appropriately and confidently, and they have very good working knowledge of what's happening and what's going to happen and what I need to do, that will naturally permeate to the community, and the community will have better trust and better confidence that even if something goes wrong, we're not going to be able to prevent everything, right? But if they have the confidence that if something goes wrong, that we will respond appropriately, that goes a long way. So that's what we're in the process of doing, because we're still trying to get some of the teachers and some of the faculty and some of the administrators to really kind of buy into this. And that's a process, and we'll get there. But we'll get there soon.
And I just had one final comment about the continuity. As students are going from elementary to junior high and high school, they're seeing the same thing, and I think that's really important as the collaborative effort, and we're working together from elementary to high school so that it's continuous. And the parents are understanding it too. Throughout, wherever you're transferring, whether you're in elementary, junior high, or high school, we're going to see the same issues or the same responses to emergencies.
Yeah, so a lot of the principals are reaching out to their parents and saying, talk to your kids about that. And when they get noticed that we're doing, and we're encouraging that notification that they're doing drills, that the parents say, hey, I heard you had a drill today. What did you do? What's that about? And so forth. So that's part of that whole process.
Okay. And I just have what is lockout versus lockdown?
So a lockdown is, you want to go into a lockdown? So a lockdown is really, the terminology is locks, lights, and out of sight. And so you lock the doors, you turn off the lights, and you get out of sight. So a violent offender can't see you and can't penetrate or access the area. A lockout is really used more for something that's outside of the campus to keep the kids in and safe from what's happening outside. And a perfect example of that is what happened at Santa Barbara High School. They had a pursuit of some burglary suspects, and then the vehicle stopped or crashed, I don't know which, but they jumped out and ran, so right next to school. So that person doesn't get access to our children, you'd put them in lockout. There's really not that big of a danger to them. There could be. We could elevate or de-elevate or de-escalate that. But the idea is to keep the danger outside of the campus. And in that situation, in a lockout, you could continue with class and your normal business inside the class.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that very lively and engaged and an educational conversation. Looking forward to that as well. And thank to each of you principals that are coming out and sharing your experiences with us as well. So I don't think there's any additional comments or questions. So thank you, Mr. Moore. Thank you, Dr. Wagner. Mr. Matsuoka?
So the idea for this year was we wanted to give a 2-meeting review. So consider this your first reading. We will bring these back as a list of 17 of them as a single action item. We'll place it on the action agenda. I'm not going to ask our principals to come out a second time. Hopefully your questions have been answered. These plans are not going to change, so they're going to come right back to you, and we hope for your approval next board meeting. I will also comment that I think we all recognize that in Mr. Moore, we have a unique resource. You can just sense his expertise. The relationship that we have with law enforcement is just, it's so good. And so we have been lightly offering him as a resource to other school districts, to the county. He offered a workshop for all the superintendents in the county. And you heard that piece about trying to build a unified team around school responses. And I think Mr. Moore is the right person to build those relationships of communication with law enforcement. So we're really thankful to have him among us. And I'll share really quickly, I had a conversation with the superintendent of Santa Rosa City Schools. And she was doing interviews with superintendents who've had to manage crises. And it's going to be a new doctoral dissertation on her part. And when I described what we went through and the Office of Emergency Services, when I described that, she said, oh my gosh, we need to bring our people from Santa Rosa County down to see what you have, because, I mean, those of us who lived through Thomas Fire debris flow, I mean, the efficiency and the power of that collaboration is unprecedented. And to have that versus not having that, we would have been in a whole different world. So just know that we in Santa Barbara are fortunate that some people funded that building, and that operation, I mean, they're kind of dialed up right now with the rain. So I would say as a community member, I'm really grateful that Santa Barbara County has had the foresight to invest in that resource.
Thank you. So we will now move on to our next report and discussion, the California School Dashboard Local Indicator Report. Ms. Carey, You guys have a nice evening. Thank you.
You're welcome to
Dr.
stay
Ramirez.
for the LCAP, but
What did I do?
Dr. Ramirez is
clear the
like
room.
feeling the love right now.
I'll see who waits. Thank you, Elise. Bye, Bill. I'm disappointed. All right, well, good evening, Board. Wanted to just thank you for the time. I wanted to just begin reintroducing this document that you've seen a couple of times over, and just want to continue to loop back to. LCAP is not just an event, it's not just a plan, it really is a set of, it's a document that really encapsulates some of our core values and really the expressions of those core values. But they happen in different events, in different ways, different installments. And what you have here is one component of that. So we wanted to make sure that the board and the public had an opportunity to orient around the different facets of LCAP and different components that go into our work, monitoring LCAP and putting it into practice. So tonight, if you look at it would be the third row from the top, the one that indicates state accountability around California School Dashboard. I just wanted to offer up that there are components of the dashboard that are populated, generated by the state, and that are very forward facing. You've seen that, and we've discussed it here before. We will discuss it again. But there are things that are, right now, there are indicators that we are allowed to respond to and to engage the public and you as a board in being able to account for on the dashboard. So tonight, to be specific, we'll be talking about Board Priority 1. It's one of 10 total, but we are responsible for 9. And it's for the current school year, 18-19, and it's around basic services. So next month, we'll be talking about priorities 3 and 6. That's our goal, and those will be around parent engagement and school climate. So a very appropriate topic given all this discussion around school safety and mental health as an added component of that. So if you don't mind, Mr. Rickman, going to the slide deck. So this is just, again, for context, just reviewed some of this a second ago, but there are again, state funding and accountability model in 2013. There are 8 priority areas, and actually I misspoke earlier. The 9th is actually having to do with the County Office of Ed. But in this new accountability, the dashboard, even since the system debuted in 2017, December of 2017, there have now been 2 different iterations. And so we're just continuing to adjust and be able to respond to the way in which information about our schools is displayed. It offers a much more robust view, but it is also much more challenging to sort through and to draw out the salient points about a school or a district. But it does offer a much more comprehensive and robust view than the alternative previously. So what you see there is in the dashboard, it identifies LEAs with their their areas of strength and their areas of need. And then there's local data that provides our district with additional information to make decisions. And finally, in the LCAP, it's where it all really ties together. So here you'll just see a review of local indicators. You'll see the local indicators there listed, and then 9 and 10 indicate just priorities for county offices. But for our purposes, we're required to be measured and discussed on an annual basis. One of the things that you'll notice is in the past, we've placed them in the fall. We want to be able to provide you a more upfront look, and that then would just come together in the board approval of the LCAP for next year, the third year, in June is when we're anticipating. So this first priority area is really in the realm of basic services. I will, there are components here that Mr. Vizzolini and Dr. Becchio may have some, that have a lot of awareness in and would be able to speak to as well, should the board have any questions. But effectively, these are the three components of this particular area. It doesn't seem as robust, but I can assure you that there's a lot of work that goes into these components just to see what's reflected here. So this doesn't do justice, the amount of work by a number of different departments, including our principals at the school level, in trying to make these numbers populate, if you will. So the first one is around teacher assignments, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It indicates the number of misassignments relative to English learners, and that can be accomplished, I believe, through two vehicles, which is the CLAD credential and a BCLAD credential. Those are the two primary ways in which the state of California authorizes the certification of teachers in support of and in direct instruction of our English learners or our multilingual students. We identified total misassignments, 18. That's a whole number, that's a total number, and that's a 2.7% of our entire teaching workforce. And finally, vacant teacher positions, it would be a 0.5, and that's a 0%. I mean, it registers as a 0.5, but in effect, it's a bit under 1%. Next is the number or percentage of students without access to their own copies of standards-aligned instructional materials for use at home. This one, followed by the next, are both reviewed and audited by our Santa Barbara County Education Office and work in conjunction. So you'll notice in past boards, you will see two pieces. One is documentation around Williams audits, and the other one is also, it's not necessarily germane to this, but it has to do with any uniform complaint procedures. Those are things that you'll see come across periodically or on a quarterly basis. The review happens in the fall, and we are given a list of schools that are going to come in review, and these are teams from the county office that come out and look at verification that is the case. So there's a lot of communication and planning from our offices and Ed Services with the County Education Office. That happened largely over the summer this year. And then in addition to that, with collaboration with our sites. And they're very accustomed to these annual reviews. And just one other point about instructional materials that we've discussed in the past. There have been significant changes in the way that the state views instructional materials. That is an emerging and very changing landscape with a number of different just realities, whether it be materials that aren't necessary, that are curated, that are intended to meet and allowed to meet standards, as well as technology and its place now as a vehicle for what before was a much less robust field of options. The last one that I'll highlight is, again, with the Williams review, there is a review of facilities, and wherever there does not meet the standard of good repair. So we had one finding, and the note here indicates that it is something that is programmed to be addressed during or as part of our facilities bond upgrades. So with that, I would welcome any questions or comments that the board may have.
Board, any questions or comments? Dr. Reed?
Just, can you explain what you mean by total misassignments? What do you mean by misassignments?
So a misassignment is where there is somebody working in a particular assignment for which they don't have full credentialing. Now, that may not mean that they have no credentials. That rarely means, in fact, it doesn't mean that. It means that they may have an alternative means by which to be authorized to be in that space. So they may be just in the process of getting a credential, but there are a number of pathways to which we would satisfy that requirement. Somebody who is actively on that is Ms. Ann Peak. So she is in constant contact with the California Teaching Credentialing Commission, and knows those procedures at a really, is just proficient in those procedures to ensure that we are always on top of them. Wherever there is a misassignment, it's because there is some component that was not fulfilled and that needs to be reported.
Like an intern position, somebody being hired under as an intern level.
I'm not sure if that's if that qualifies, if that's one of the parameters. Perhaps Mr. Becchio can also shed light on some of that.
Check, okay. Good evening, Board. Those would be actually the provisional internship permits that we bring before you for approval. Those are teachers who do not have a base credential. They do have the subject area credits from college, but we do bring them before you for approval in that subject area, but they are not considered an assignment. It's a misassignment, actually. We also have the short-term staff permits where those teachers don't have a full credential, but they actually have passed the CSET, so they have a subject area competency. And then we have we get board approved if a teacher has a base credential, but we're having them teach in a different subject area based on their college level credits. So an example of that would be a math teacher that has a credential in math, but they actually also have units in science from their college career, and then we would bring that before you if we needed them to teach science, and we'd ask for your approval on that. That would be a misassignment as well.
Thank you. I just hadn't heard that terminology. So is this a reflection, you think, of the teacher shortage that these misassignments took place?
Well, most certainly we see that appear where we are having difficulty filling positions with fully credentialed teachers, and so yes.
So I just had a question. That's kind of misleading because you're not just going to intentionally misassign someone. So can that be restated?
Sorry about that. That's correct, and all those come before you for approval. So.
Yes, but I don't think we're thinking we're approving misassignment. So I'm just saying that's just kind of misleading. Wordsmithing, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, I believe that's probably state language.
Is that part of state language?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
It is, and it is. This is a way to just indicate to the community that, as we're having this discussion, that there are moments at which, or special scenarios where there may not be a teacher that meets the same credentialing threshold that other counterparts may. But of course, what Dr. Becchio had alluded to in terms of our intentionality behind ensuring that there is subject and domain-specific competency, that is really the work of HR in terms of finding those right matches. But there are conditions beyond us that preclude that. But that particular terminology is commonplace and is part of how we're expected to report out those discrepancies.
Yeah, that's kind of like learning that the first year. I think we were talking about sun shining. It was like misleading.
Yes.
Oh, just shedding light on something. So now
Yes.
you're just saying that they're just not, fully credentialed. So
Sure.
we just make it plain language.
Sure.
But the one question that I had was with regards to the facility that was found not to be in good repair. Is that just on a regular schedule as part of the upgrades, or is it an emergency fix?
So we use what's called the facility inspection tool annually, and we report it on our website. So we do that starting in about August, and we usually get them turned in by December. This particular one is actually the pavement at Adams School, which is getting replaced this summer. And that's the only one that we had. And so those good repair standards are a state standard, and it's a little misleading also, because to not be in good repair means it's not working at all.
Right.
So like a heating system that was not working at all, or you have a gas leak, that's not good repair. So it's not necessarily like an old gas line, it's more like something that's failed.
Thank you for the explanation. Additional comments or questions for Dr. Ramirez?
I just had an additional comment about the credentialing and something worth noting. I just noticed in the documents that you were provided, there is a decrease of 50% of that misassignment in credentialing. So that's not something that I was aware of. I wasn't in this position last year, but that's really significant. And I think as we start our hiring practices early, I know that's something that Superintendent Matsuoka has brought to our district, the priority of hiring early and getting in on the candidates that have full credentials, that could have quite a bit to do with a decrease of that sort. So I wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Okay.
Just one.
Dr. Reed?
And just to add on to the misassignments, I'm sure that there is support in place for those who have been positioned in those misassignments because they aren't fully credentialed teachers who are in a position that it is new to them, but they're still not fully certified. So you do have a support system set up for them in terms of that year that they're in the assignment.
That's correct, and we have we'll bring a report for you on the TIP program, the teacher induction program, but that's very significant support for our new teachers. And we do have that on the list from, I know you requested that last time, we'll bring that forward in a month or two.
I think that concludes the questions. We're good on that one? All right. So was that the only thing that you were going to be presenting, Dr. Ramirez?
I'm going to stay up here for the next item as well.
Oh, okay, so you up here too. Okay, thank you. You're ahead of me. Thank you. Okay, now review proposal for research agreement between Santa Barbara Unified School District and the University of California at Santa Barbara for evaluation of just communities. Dr. Ramirez.
Once again, good evening, board. And I also want to acknowledge the work of Ms. Carey in this space and this partnership with Just Communities. So just to bring, the board and the public back into, for some context, in the fall, as we were discussing from the outset, the opportunity to re-engage in a contract and in a partnership with Just Communities, there was a board desire to find an evaluative component to understand where the successes stood, what was the progress. There were opportunities here to live up to that priority of evaluating our work. So what you have before you is initial attempt to do just that, to bring that forward and make sure that we are looking at our programming, looking at ways to improve. One of the things that I wanted to highlight from the outset is that this level of evaluation is different. I think it's important to note that there is a continuum of how to evaluate work and how to inform our practices. And in this case, we are talking about a research level evaluation, and that does set it apart from many of our other internal evaluations because of the level of thoroughness and the range and scope of this particular work. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that you'll see in the documents that UCSB is our partner on this. We had the opportunity dating back to early part of last fall to talk to the dean, to talk to their staff, and Dr. Guillermo Juan is here, and I really have to credit her for her work behind the scenes in developing this research design, because it is not easy. It is not easy. The scope of it is very difficult to tease out impact, and so what you have before you is an attempt to do two things. It's to evaluate our work, yes, but also to do so in a time period that allows us to do so in a more expedited fashion, because this work, as you know, it's a lot about mindset, and there isn't an immediate opportunity to see it play out in some of the metrics and quantitative tools that we readily have available. but nevertheless, there is an opportunity to measure its growth and measure its impact. So I just wanted to put that forward as a way to frame this particular discussion. So in a moment, we'll go through the presentation, and should you have any particular technical questions having to do with the research design or the partnership with UCSB, there will be an opportunity for Dr. Guillermo Juan to offer up her thoughts in this as well. So we'll just start again with background and context. The partnership, or the purpose of this particular partnership, is to support our staff in becoming a culturally proficient district, and by this I mean the partnership with Just Communities. It's now been a more long-standing one that has gradually increased over the years and sustained over the years. The other purpose of this particular partnership is to engage students and families of most vulnerable and underperforming student groups regarding school improvement. We ultimately want to see equitable outcomes, equitable access, equitable opportunity for all of our students, recognizing that there are gaps that I've identified, some in fact that have been addressed earlier tonight in the presentation that came from our very own student leaders at Santa Barbara High School. Our programming, Just Communities has been a provider and a partner since 2005. Granted, the programming may have looked different in size and scope and scale, but as particularly on the onset of the LCAP, there was a huge opportunity to really lean into this kind of work, as we were now called upon to measure things that we had never measured before, or as we availed ourselves of information and data that we previously did not have. So there is a nexus between those as well. The programs are offered for students, staff, and parents. There's different programming, although the bulk of it really resides in our IEE, is where the main emphasis might be. And the content is based in social science and interdisciplinary educational research. Evaluation efforts, we did want to acknowledge that there have been prior evaluative opportunities and efforts put forward. Most recently in 2013 and as a third-party evaluation. Now, a lot has changed since 2013. A lot changes in 5 years. So it was appropriate to revisit this now at this juncture. But also folded into the LCAP metrics, we have just in our own right at the school and district level and community level, I would say, been monitoring those metrics that since 2014, since, again, the outset of our first iteration of LCAP. Transitioning here to the evaluation design, I won't go through every point by point, but the purpose broadly is to evaluate the effects of Just Communities programming on students, staff, parents, and schools within SB Unified, within our district. You see there the guiding questions, and this is what starts to give way to some of the complexity, the individual and school level characteristics of students who participated and compared to those that didn't, as well as the direct impact of student participation. Those are very difficult to tease out. Not all of those, again, are reflected in our metrics, but they are certainly felt. So there is an opportunity here to really consider, and there were a lot of different facets that could have been considered and that were considered as part of this brainstorming with UCSB. And I was there more or less as a witness, not always as an active participant, to just some research minds that were really trying to grapple with what's the proper methodology to ensure that we're capturing impact and doing it justice, if you will. The quantitative methods, when we use the word de-identified, it means simply that it cannot be traced back to a single student. And that is something that we're looking at from school year 11-12 and forward. It's where we feel that we have the most complete and accurate picture of our data and metrics. Now, we also want to be very honest with and very forward with the board in addressing some of our limitations. the evaluation timeline is a limitation. So whenever we put a constraint, this is the type of study that could find a much bigger scope, a much bigger footprint, and a much longer pathway. But recognizing that that there is a sense of urgency around getting preliminary information, it was important to come to a consensus about what our timeline might entail. And we wanted to have this particular study, this particular evaluation, conducted in a way that coincided with our public discussions around LCAP. Finally, the other thing that I would say is that available data. Again, we don't have the means by which to track every single desired metric outcome. We're just, I'm afraid to say, very limited in some of the ability to capture some of that data. For example, that we don't have a system that would track parent data or parent opinions in a very specific and concrete way. We have tools that help us get an aggregate look, but not necessarily the way to capture it down to the parent the way that we might a student. So just or staff for that matter. So just recognize that there are some limitations in what we can do in terms of research methodology. So here's what we're proposing or have identified as a timeline that we would like to offer up to the board and would like to put forward. Our discussion would happen this evening with a potential board action happening on the 26th, which is our next scheduled regular board session. In March, we would work through a data preparation and data analysis. April, data analysis would continue. By May, we'd be looking to report, for there to be a report, start to come together. And finally, sometime in May and June, for there to be a board report and discussion on the findings of this particular evaluation. So with that, I would like to just turn it over to the board for any questions or comments. If you don't mind, Dr. Guillermo, maybe joining me here at the podium.
Board, any questions? Dr. Reed?
Thank you very much. I was wondering, so you specified that it was specifically the IEE that you're focusing on, Institute, or is it talking in class, or?
Good evening, board. This evaluation will look at student, staff, and parent participation. When we talk about measuring impact, we're only really able to look at the impact of student and staff participation on student engagement outcomes and student academic outcomes.
Okay.
Sorry, just to clarify, my point earlier was that IEE factors in as perhaps the biggest program offering that in terms of our partnership with Just Communities, just to clarify, sorry.
So were you considering, I know you're on the timeline that you're on, and this is a quantitative, survey.
It is.
So were you considering at all integrating any qualitative research, interviewing of students as a more maybe comprehensive approach?
We absolutely considered it. And this is where we have to consider trade-offs. If we would like a more robust study, we certainly can, and the board can decide that that is the direction in which you would like to proceed. What would have to give way, however, is the timeline and the associated cost. So both of those are very interrelated, and the broader the scope, the more we use mixed methods, the more it will add to our timeline, because we now need to bring more staff, more research support to be able to undertake it, and it will necessitate also an increase in cost.
So the idea being that we attempt this first approach in evaluation, and then is it going to be for us to reconsider whether there needs to be an ongoing effort in terms of maybe making it mixed methods, or this was sufficient enough? I mean, is there a plan to do this ongoing, or is it just to complete it in this timeline?
Well, I recognize a sense of urgency around it because it was first brought up. It's been brought up before, but it was brought up more fully last fall. So we all have acknowledged that the board was interested in that, that being the case. We want it to be timely, and we do view this as a first pass, a first opportunity, a foundation, if you will, for what may emerge, depending on what that evaluation ultimately shows, toward a different expression of that, perhaps in a different form, adding a qualitative component, because we also recognize that there is power in, and as we've seen in public comment, as we've seen in so many different events and audiences, that there is a compelling, just a compelling story to be told by many individuals. But for our purposes, right now, we did want to be timely and use this as a foundation, as a start, as a solid start to perhaps what may emerge in the future, should there be a desire to also on the part of the board to move forward in that direction.
So I appreciate that. I just know that this particular program is all about interaction and communication and connect, and the processes of that. And really, that's the essential piece of it, right? The understanding and communicating feelings and sensitivity training. So I guess I would want to know, I guess I understand we're in the timeline, and I certainly appreciate the evaluation going forward, but I do think that that is something to consider perhaps going forward, and maybe we can reconsider that at the end of this evaluation. It's just that that's the whole key to Just Communities. It's hard to do that in data surveys.
Mr. Matsuoka.
Can I interject a question? This is really going to go both directions. So if we do this scope of evaluation, does it make sense to then add on version 2, which is the mixed methods, the interviews, the longer process? Is that kind of creating an artificial separation from a research evaluation standpoint? Or those two could they could be sequencing? Okay, so that helps with, I was going to propose. So I think we all understand from the board's perspective the need to do this evaluation. But I also am now recognizing that, talking to people in interviews would be a big part of evaluating the mindset shifts and such. We could start the evaluation process, but I'm mindful that the contract renewal for Just Communities, we really want to bring that to the board in June so that we don't get into this, we've opened school and the process starts. So I'm going to pose the option, we could start the longer evaluation process. You just won't have that in hand to weigh the renewal of the Just Communities contract. Hearing the evaluation response, I think we could do the shorter one, have some data to do program evaluation at least by May, June, and then ponder the contract renewal. And then if we want to extend, then we could do the longer study.
Yeah, and I would like to have Dr. Yermawan weigh in on this, because just to validate your thoughts, we absolutely recognize all of those components are lend value, and we want to be able to capture that. And it was very much a part of our initial discussion. But I'll turn it over to Dr. Yermawan to be able to provide her thoughts.
I want to reassure you that we definitely had a serious conversation about mixed methods, and given the constraints of time and available data, landed on a trade-off in the quantitative study where we will be looking at some survey data over the last 4 years. We have a good data set from parent, staff, and students through the climate surveys that we've been administering, and have reliable response rates from that. The limitation in that data is that it is completely anonymous, and so it cannot be linked back to student records, which we would then de-identify. So the trouble with that is we can't then statistically measure impact on things like student perceptions of teachers, say respecting students, or the relevance of curriculum, or students' perceptions of their interactions with peers. the very things that you've mentioned that the work with Just Communities aims to impact. We will, and it's in the third research question, we will look at that, but we are not able to do it with statistical significance. We'll be looking at school level growth along a number of different survey items over time in relationship to the increasing percentage of student, staff, and parent participation in Just Communities. So that's a trade-off that we made, and one that we felt we could bring forward with confidence, understanding that there would be a great interest in a more qualitative look at the programming and its impact on our school communities.
So just a follow-up question. So the work that you're doing is actually reflected from which testing, which survey?
Annually, we administer the California Healthy Kids Survey to students, and then there's a parent survey and a staff survey that are done in November and December annually, and that's also part of our LCAP reporting. From those surveys, we derive student sense of safety, student sense of connectedness, and parent involvement measures, which you'll actually see some of them at the February 26th board meeting when we do the local indicator report for those two areas. And so that's the survey that has additional questions that pertain to cultural proficiency and things like school climate around diversity, that we can also look at some of the responses over the last 4 years.
So the assumption is that those questions in the survey relative to cultural proficiency are going to reflect the work that Just Communities has done for the district.
That's the underlying assumption of that research question, yes.
So I guess I have a question about that. So I guess it's you're making that assumption, and you feel strongly that that is the case.
There's a very large body of research, primarily in the higher ed space, that spans about 3 decades around the climate for diversity, not just for race, ethnicity, but a variety of social identity groups. And so there are models in the research, statistical models in the research, that show improvement of the climate for diversity impacts student sense of belonging, which impacts a host of educational outcomes, both engagement outcomes and academic outcomes. And so we are making the assumption that holds true in a K-12 organizational setting, and are willing to look for those relationships in our local data.
Is there other organizations or other work being done and that you would isolate or that you would say are part of this process? I mean, we're assuming that you're giving Just Communities all of the credit for this, but is there other work being done that we should know about that could also skew this data?
The work around implicit bias comes to mind. There is also an evaluation being done by Dr. Said on that in particular. We are in the statistical models, the ones where we can measure impact, we're controlling for a number of, I'm using researchy language, but we're using a lot of control variables and some moderating variables. We are not planning to control for student participation in other programs, because this is the primary program through which we as a school district, that and the implicit bias training, work with our community to improve our climate. I can say that to account for the implicit bias training, that we are going to be very mindful of looking at the years of data that Dr. Said is conducting her evaluation on, to make sure that we don't accidentally attribute potential improvements, if we even do see improvements at all, and that we're not attributing it to that. So we will be looking closely, and I plan to be in communication with her to get a little bit more detail about the statistical models that she is using. But I've looked at the data that she is examining, and we're looking at some similar and some different outcomes. So I feel very confident that we're not going to be attributing anything where it's not due.
Because there is it's a this is based on 4 years of data versus we started implicit bias 2 years ago, but it's not been comprehensive across the district. It's only been rolled out, not comprehensively, correct?
I think to date, we've trained about 35% of our certificated staff. In terms of its influence on the Healthy Kids Survey, and we've done the training 2 years. And so, I mean, the only effect to filter out is the impact on last year's Healthy Kids Survey. We haven't given the survey this year, so I think we're in a pretty good space to separate that out.
Ms. Capps?
Thank you. I'm happy to see that this evaluation is going forward, and I think it brings back to an earlier part of our meeting that one of the core values is evaluation. And so I just think it's important, especially with the controversy swirling around this program, that this is something that the board has asked for repeatedly with different programs, whether it's mental health, other programs, and sort of an approach that evaluation is part of a program, just the way that we evaluate our academic achievement. So ideally, I think that this cost would be built into a contract so that it's not sort of hanging out there the way that it is here, and people think, oh, wow, that's a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but I believe it's taxpayers' money that we need to be responsible and to evaluate a program to make sure that it's working. And so I appreciate this approach, and just would suggest going forward that this kind of thing is thought more on the front end, so that it's part of a contract in totality. In terms of the method, I appreciate the questions by Dr. Reed. I also was curious about that qualitative versus quantitative. But I did notice when we did approve the contract a few months ago, I read the last evaluation that was done 5 years ago, 2013, 33 pages, and it seemed as though it was entirely qualitative. So my question really to you is sort of, I understand that evaluator was not available. She's well regarded in this community, but can we use, I just would hope that evaluation can be built upon, at least with awareness from all of the interviews that were done for just 5 years ago. I know the program has grown a lot since then. And certainly from a qualitative point of view, and you mentioned we've had a lot of public comment. We've had a lot of people share their direct experiences. I'm sure that can't be used scientifically in this evaluation, but I do think it informs the process. So I guess my question, to state it more succinctly, is how will the past evaluation of this program be utilized going forward?
Thank you for your question, and we did definitely wrestle with that as well. In the 2013 evaluation, there is actually a logic model at the back that identifies a number of student outcomes that that the district should see growth in 5 years later. It's now 5 to 6 years later, and some of those outcomes are either explicitly ones that we are measuring, or if they are things that no longer exist, such as CST scores, we're trying to find appropriate data that would kind of substitute for many things that are no longer at play in our state. So the past evaluation absolutely informed the current iteration that you're seeing, and I want to reaffirm, we as the staff and in communication and collaboration with UCSB would be very interested in having a qualitative component beyond survey data considered by the board, but again, with the constraints of time and money, those are things that we would look to you for you to weigh in on.
So I guess I'll just weigh in that I understand the time constraints and we needed to do this in this process, but I would weigh in that that is a key component that I think because of the type of program Just Communities is, to have that qualitative piece. And I think it would enrich and make it even more apparent the robust work that Just Communities does do. I'm only asking these questions because I want to ensure that we're doing the most optimum process if possible based on the time constraints, but that we consider going forward that if we want to keep this going forward and keep our programs robust and really being analyzed and evaluated appropriately, that we consider bringing in the mixed methods or seeing where we go next steps when we get the final report in June.
I would just add one comment with regards to the time constraint. Is it because we need to renew the contract? What does the time constraint consist of?
So the time constraint is one that really deals with the end of year and looking at creating an LCAP. If you recall, Just Communities, the partnership with Just Communities is called out very specifically as a foundational partnership in our first goal, which is to really create a culturally proficient district. It really, I would say, it's a cornerstone partnership, and that programming is important and vital to those efforts. Should there be a desire to move in a different direction, that would certainly impact the way that we construct both the budget and the actual the document itself and how we engage in those discussions with community. Because it's the board's, because the board is the final, analysis, if you will, on moving forward with approving an LCAP. We just wanted to make sure that we afforded you the information that you had requested, as well as enough time to be able to provide reflection, input, whatever the case might be. To your point, Dr. Reed, we would certainly invite an opportunity to expand upon this. I know UCSB is eager, interested, from the dean on through, to be able to work on that, because they themselves really showed a tremendous amount of support in wanting to work with us and partner with us on this. And so I would say that the interest is there, but to your question, Ms. Sims-Moten, around the time constraint, that's what I would call out as an important factor.
I can just say personally, I would rely probably more heavily on the qualitative, because it's how you make you feel, in terms of that, how you're responding to a program that you're part of, and how does it change your mindset. So I think that's a critical part. I mean, I know it's part of this discussion, and I'm glad we're having that, but I think that's a very important part and would certainly be a part of making my decision on to how we go forward, in terms of that, because we just need to know if the program is effective in changing attitude, and how do we do that.
So to that question, what I would then ask the board is, would you be comfortable with a separate timeline for this research evaluation, for us to go back to UCSB and consider alternative timelines and to come up with a different design model, or one that includes the qualitative components, recognizing that there will not be an opportunity to have that in hand in that May-June timeline. I actually, because we didn't consider and walk down that path with our research partners, we didn't really entertain what that other timeline might entail, or fully vet out what those components would look like. And again, that would be a commitment of additional resources perhaps as well. So if that is the desire of the board, I would absolutely love to hear that.
Dr. Reed?
Yeah, I would just say that I would be interested in hearing if you went back to UCSB and said, if we were to change it to mixed methods, is there a process that by June that we could have some valid information or something to work from, just to see what that would be? What would we receive, or what would be the opportunity for us in that changing it to the mixed methods?
So Dr. Reed, to that specific question, I would say that we actually literally asked that question. And there's two responses. One is that to do this with the level of integrity that is called for, that timeline simply is not feasible. The other thing that I would say is, because of the broad scope of what we might begin to unearth by way of something that starts to draw in qualitative research, because that would necessitate for them to expand the team, expand the commitment of time on their end to be able to accommodate. And so we very quickly arrived at the fact, and it was deliberate. It was a lot of deliberation, but very early discussed that was not going to be feasible. And again, if we want something of integrity, that timeline would not coincide with our efforts.
Though integrity is important to this whole process.
Absolutely.
Is there a way to find out what a two-prong approach would be, so that, obviously we won't have it perhaps for this timeline, but how an ongoing iterative process could take place to really understand and go get the results that we're really...
Sure. I'll turn it over to
Looking
Dr. Guillermo Juan on that.
I have a clarifying question before I try to answer your question. Are you requesting that that we or they or in partnership develop maybe a very draft design of what future evaluation would look like? I'm trying to distinguish between moving forward with the current proposal, and then, because we had many conversations, and then we had to just start putting a parking lot to all of our ideas because of this time constraint. But I'm hearing that the board may be interested in potentially moving forward with this, with some sort of almost a contingency or understanding that there would be additional evaluation that's more qualitative in nature. So I guess my question is, are you asking for us to come back to you with a qualitative or mixed methods design? And if so, in what time frame are you hoping to see that?
I guess what I'm asking is that when you met, what you first came up with was this should be a mixed method approach.
Correct.
And if that is the case, it was the time constraints that stopped you from doing what you felt would be the best approach, which would be a mixed methods approach.
Correct.
So if you look at this program that we are hoping to continue to build upon and utilize, that we should look at this as a big picture, and what could we be doing in an ongoing process that would really have the integrity and the robust results that we're looking for from qualitative and quantitative research.
Yes, I think we are in agreement of what I think there is common understanding of what both the board and the staff and UCSB are looking for in this, and so it's good to hear that from you in terms of going back to UCSB and discussing and kind of trying to flesh out what would the mixed methods version look like, even if the qualitative came after the quantitative.
Yes.
So what would we, if we were going back to that, and I know you got to go back to UCSB and then discussion among yourselves, so would we be compromising anything other than a timeline constraint? Would we be, if we needed to add this additional qualitative information, would that then impact your ability to get or to give us more information with regards to the LCAP? So I'm just trying to figure out, if we did that, fine, but what would be compromising if we did so?
Well, the compromise would be that there would be potentially an entire, area that would be unexplored to the extent that the board seems to desire. So we would still have all of our other metrics. We would still have all of the metrics that we have now identified for a number of years, which I think have in their own right a great deal of value, and that we've learned to rely on in terms of making more informed decisions about programming, about staffing, about a number of different areas in which we invest the public's dollars. I don't know if I'm answering your question appropriately, Ms. Moten, but there would be, I guess there would be some areas that would be left unexplored, perhaps, to the extent that to the extent that we would have to just sit with that information, which to some may appear limited, to expand upon it would mean that, the board would feel comfortable with us using different metrics to determine whether you are interested in continuing with the programming and with the contract into the coming year. So I don't know if I'm answering your question appropriately, so I want to defer to you on that.
No, you are. I was just trying to see if we were saying, if we extended the contract to include the things that we're asking, the mixed approach, what would be compromised? Would it the fact that, because the contract has to be renewed, I'm assuming that's part of the time constraint, and then secondly, the LCAP information informed, right? So those are the two things that would not be fully informed if we extended the time to include the mixed.
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, again, I want to be careful with this idea of
Sure.
not being fully informed,
Yeah.
because bear in mind that as part of the LCAP process, we thoroughly discussed this with our LCAP Parent Advisory Committee. We do have an LCAP survey. We do have opportunities to interact with staff. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we are engaging in active communications. And I also want to add that in terms of the intentionality that this district is engaged upon, I have to say that it is, in talking to colleagues in other districts and in other areas, it is a cut above because of the level of information that the board and the public have come to desire and to really hunger in terms of evaluating our work in a true sense. Informing our work sounds different, but evaluating our work is exactly what we're talking about, which is very complicated, particularly when we're not talking about attribution that can be always reflected in the metrics that we currently have as a school system. So I just don't want for us and the public to lose sight of the fact that we have many different data points that do capture opinions, thoughts, and ideas in very real ways. And so, and we're committed to re-engaging in those processes as well. So I don't want to give the impression to the board or to the public that we're just going just blindly into a process. It's quite the contrary, but what you're asking for is something much more robust than what many other districts would be asking for.
Then that would conclude me to think that we could extend the timeline to include this this mixed approach. Because we do have good information that I was thinking that if we extend the timeline, it would impact, your LCAP.
No, it would not. I mean, it would really ultimately come down to the board's desire to approve an LCAP that if all of these other data points suggest that we should move forward with programming, that we would be inclined to include. And that's been done before. And we also know the reality, and as I mentioned before, the commitment with Just Communities has been a cornerstone of our first goal, which is around developing a culturally proficient district. And it has been for a number of years because of those opinions, ideas, and data points that unfortunately don't come neatly packaged the way that this might.
Right. Dr. Reed?
Yeah, just to say that the work of Just Communities is crucial and critical to our district. Also for the public knows it's a large line item. So with those two ideas in tandem, it's important to really make sure that we are doing our most effective evaluation to uncover the work that they're doing, to ensure that we are indeed moving forward and eliciting change in our development of cultural proficiency. So, I don't know.
So I want to maybe test what I believe I'm hearing to see if there is agreement. What I am hearing is that the board would be open to the idea of not coinciding this research design and research, this evaluative component with the approval of the LCAP, that the board would be okay with having a separate timeline that would better capture or attempt to capture more of the nuances and the complexities of what programming Just Communities brings to our district.
I think that
That's what I think.
says it.
Yes.
That we would be okay with a separate timeline to do so. But I am certainly open. That's just me talking, but
Well,
it's open.
I'm in agreement.
Other thoughts? Ms. Capps, I know you got a burning thought in there.
I'm in agreement, too.
Ms. Munoz? I'm sorry, what did you say?
Oh, I'm in agreement also.
Okay,
Ms.
so,
Capps?
Yeah, I mean, it's a predicament because I think it's important to have this analysis before a new contract is evaluated. But I understand the point that you're making, and so I support that approach.
okay, so with that, we will come back to our working group with Dr. Yermawan and our partners at UCSB, and revisit and perhaps, as soon as we can, try to bring back a research design that captures the wishes of the board in order to move forward and then gather additional opinions, recognizing that there would be a separate timeline and a separate, scope of work that we would look to.
Yes, and I'm agree, and I would just want to add that I think what we do here, because we are the district that's, I think, in a cutting edge really around cultural proficiency and the cultural proficiency framework that we've designed, and to have that evaluated in the most robust way would be a wonderful framework for other districts to take up, so we could be actually setting a cutting edge moving forward for other districts to take on something that we have framed successfully.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think our staff appreciates the recognition from the board of the work that's been undertaken, and also the value of being able to more robustly demonstrate the impact on our school communities. I have a clarifying question in the vein of what Dr. Ramirez has been testing with you, and that is, if we go back to the drawing board with UCSB to develop the multiple methods or mixed methods evaluation that we had identified in concept earlier as the ideal way to do this, but didn't go down that path due to what we had perceived as a time constraint for the approval of the Just Communities contract and the LCAP. In going back to that, I think we staff need clarity as to if you want this to happen. I think you're saying you don't need this to happen by June, because if this is not voted upon on February 26th, we will compromise any chance of this happening before June. So I just want to be completely clear with the board, because it is a very, very compressed timeline. So I just want you to hold that and be very explicit. I want to be very explicit about that. If we're going to move in that direction. And I think I'm hearing you say yes. I'm just trying to be thorough.
In my opinion, yes. And I guess what we would want maybe to come back and just share what you've gleaned from that conversation as to what the timeline might be. And maybe if the knowledge is that we want something more robust like this, there might be other ways of looking at how to do this process that might be expedited quicker, perhaps not, but the potential of reframing and rethinking it could lead to other ways of doing the evaluation.
Well, thank you for the clarification. I think we as staff have the clarity that we need in order to move forward with UCSB, and we look forward to bringing that back as soon as we can to gather opinion once again.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I just have to
Yes,
comment.
please.
I am so proud of all of us. I mean, the questions that you are asking as a board, I've never had school board members understand research enough to ask questions at that level. So bravo to you. And I think you guys know me. It's like, okay, part of my job is to make sure we walk out with clarity about what we are deciding. And our two leads have asked you some very pointed, clarifying questions. But I'm going to summarize because this is going to be a big deal in the next 4 months, because we know the renewal is going to bring community scrutiny. But I think we've heard very clearly, you're ready to stand and approve the LCAP and approve a renewal of Just Communities as we embark on a full study. And I think that's going to, I think you can stand on, we have asked for a full mixed method study. So when you get criticized, you're saying, we need the whole data set. We don't need a rushed version of it. But I just appreciate the stand that you're taking even tonight. You didn't even vote, but you have voted. And so I'm going to ask for our team. We have a 4-day holiday. And UCSB, I mean, they've got a full load. So realistically, this update's not going to come back until March. Waiting for my calendar. I think it's March 12th. All right, so that gives the team a month, because 2 weeks between board meetings, honestly, the board agenda prep is like next week already, Tuesday. So just want to give the board a sense of timing. I think my other comment, because Just Community has been such a high-profile partner with us, I think we've heard a lot of what our community and our staff thinks of the work of Just Communities. It's not like we have an absence of data, as Dr. Ramirez has said. It's going to come out in the LCAP process, but it has happened in this boardroom. It happened where did we meet? La Cumbre. I think we've heard very clearly about how our community values this. So I think with confidence, you can move forward with the renewal.
Mr. Matsuoka, I just wanted to offer up a thought. From our standpoint, we are committed to doing whatever we need around scheduling, but we also have to be mindful of coordinating those schedules with UCSB and finding the right people in the right venue to have that discussion. We would love to hit that mark, but I think just if the board could be flexible with us and understanding that we will do our best to hit that mark. But I just have to speak for the level of collaboration and coordination that it took just to bring this forward, dating back to an aggressive timeline as of last December on through to now. And so to replicate that in short order may be a bit challenging. So I just wanted to ask for a bit of patience and flexibility from the board in order for our staff to coordinate what we would like to, what you all have reflected you would like to see.
And your efforts and all of your efforts to do that, to get it back to even to this point for us, we asked it some time ago to bring it back this comprehensive, are not going lost on us. And so we didn't want to cause any consternation tonight.
Thank you.
But I think
Appreciate
it's
it.
important for us to really have a robust space so that we can, when we're standing behind something, we have the evidence why we're doing it.
Thank
and
you.
it leaves no doubt as to how we need to move forward. So
Thank you. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Yes, thank you very much. And we
Thank
want
you.
to make sure you get home to your babies and kids,
Yes.
too.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay. All right, so we don't have any items that we need to bring back for discussion. So any coming events? Board members would like to know?
Coffee with the board. February,
28th.
28th is going to be at Dos Pueblos High School from 5:30 to 6:30. And Ms. Sims Moten and I will be facilitating that, and we look forward to many, many parents coming and dialoguing with us.
Okay, thank you. So future agenda items, I know there's a list somewhere, so if we can maybe get together on that, but barring that list, are there any additional items that we need to add to future agenda items? Okay, so the next brings us to our final item. Next meeting is February 26th, and following that is March 12th. So do I hear a motion to adjourn? No second needed. Goodbye. Have a nice evening.